So our lesson number 9 is the only good debt, as far as I'm concerned, is debt that you can afford to repay and you have a plan to repay, and the emphasis is on the you. It has to be you that's determined that you can afford it, and it has to be your plan, not somebody else having a plan for you or telling you can afford something when you haven't determined it yourself. Let me tell you some stories. When I bought my first home in the 1970s, there were only 3 kinds of mortgages. And in order to get a mortgage, you had to put 20% down. Unless you were a veteran like me, you could put 10% down. But this was a hard, fast rule. Your principal and interest on your mortgage, taxes and insurance on your home could not be more than 25 to 28% of your income, and the bank did all the math for you, because they really cared about you in those days. It's not true, folks. They had rules, laws, regulations that they had to comply with, so they were protecting themselves. You just happened to be the beneficiary. But many of those rules, laws, regulations are gone. And so fast forward to 2009, and I'm at a conference at the Treasury Department in Washington, D.C. And the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury says, today, there are 28 different residential mortgages, and to be honest with you, this is him talking, not me, only the lawyers and accountants understand 4 through 28. The bankers don't even understand them. They just give them talking point sheets so they can sell them. So here's the kind of things that we see in the bankruptcy court all the day. We see people, including many college graduates, many of them high school teachers, who have 40% ratio houses because they were told they could afford them. But that's a reason why they're in bankruptcy court. And so they didn't do the math on what they could afford. They didn't go to the internet and look at that old tried and true 25 to 28% ratio. They just took everybody's word for it, that they could afford it, because that's what they were told. And now, many of them had their houses foreclosed on, taken away because they couldn't make the mortgage payments. They couldn't afford that mortgage, and they couldn't afford that house. When I told that story one year, a business teacher asked if he could tell this story, and I've told it ever since. He told the students they were looking for a new home, and he did all the math on what he could afford. He was a business teacher, so that's what they love doing. They love doing math. And he knew exactly what he could afford. He went to the bank, and he asked him if he could get pre-approved for a mortgage in that amount. Getting pre-approved for a mortgage means that when you put an offer in on a house to the seller knows you're going to get that mortgage, and so everything goes much more smoothly. They said, no problem. We can give you a pre-approval for that mortgage, but you should know that you could afford something $80,000 more. He was in shock. He looked at them and he said, what are you talking about? I know I can't afford $80,000 more. I've done the math. Why would you say that to me? They're just upselling him because today they can. And so when it comes to anything, student loan debt, car loan debt, mortgages, you better do the math yourself. Know what you can afford. Don't let anybody talk you into something that you can't afford. It's got to be your plan for how you're going to repay that back, or otherwise there can be consequences. So do the math yourself, no matter what it is. And when it comes to debt, because people tell you student loan debt, car loan debt, mortgage debt, but that's not necessarily true. Debt is only about 2 things. It's about the interest rate and the term of the loan. And when you do the math on that, you will actually see what you are paying and whether in the long run you can afford it or not. Only good debt is debt you can afford to repay, and you have a plan to repay. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise.